I'm I'm very excited about the challenges that humans are embracing. I think you could argue it's never been an easy thing being a human. We've always had struggles between environmental challenges and our survival. We've had struggles between tribes of humans competing for resources or just competing for philosophy and dominance, this hierarchy thing. We're now living in an extremely fascinating period where most of the world is progressing forward in a social construct, a human society coupled to government and corporate existence. So human corporations, and we didn't talk about this. We probably don't have time to really get into it, but it turns out if you look at something called evolutionary thermodynamics, there's a whole branch of almost philosophy that will tell you that governments and corporations are essentially alive. They are as alive as you and me. And we, in our challenges with global warming and with war and with a whole bunch of other things that are just scary for a lot of our population, we are really up against that reality. We're up against this competition between corporations for their living process. And we are to them like our blood cells are to us.
Welcome to Old God Talks to Me, a podcast dedicated to helping guys create kick-ass lives for themselves and those that they love. Ladies, if you want to know what your guy is thinking, this podcast is for women too. Each week, a special guest helps you create that life you've imagined. We talk anti-aging medicine, personal growth, relationships and hot sex. Yeah, you hear me, getting laid more frequently, other guy vices, and topics that many don't want to talk about but need to. Just because you're getting older doesn't mean you have to be old. Don't want to miss anything? Be sure to subscribe, share, rate, and review this podcast. And be sure to go to www.thestandard.academy/magazine and grab a free copy of our new digital magazine, The Standard Academy, where we talk about erogenous zones, growing hair back, and other things that will help you create that kick-ass life. Now get ready to listen up and share with friends.
Well, I will tell you, I've shared this many a time on my podcast with other guests. I feel in many ways like I am in my 40s and 50s. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that I've been optimized on testosterone for over 25 years. Mm-hmm. And I know that when I first started, my primary care physician had all these horror stories they told me that never materialized. And I felt vindicated when I finally, I've known about this and I had researched it pretty well and gotten with some androgen experts, but now even there's consensus papers on the safety and the benefits of testosterone optimization, even from the Mayo Clinic. So it's actually coming into the full stream. Unfortunately now, all these clinics that are showing up, I don't know if you have them in Vermont, I assume you do because they're all over the place because they're a lucrative business, is they end up selling you a bunch of other stuff that's not particularly good for you. But I think that's one of the things that there's the Massachusetts male normative aging study, and it talks about the generational decline of testosterone levels in men.
What is the percentage decline?
It's huge. Like I don't remember it. I don't remember it.
I think it is substantial, right?
It's substantial.
Our ability
to
generate
I mean,
testosterone.
And I can actually, I got a whole file, a Dropbox file. If you'd like, I can send it to you. It has all that.
Sure. Yeah, I love
all those studies in there. But even just lately, the laboratory values have dropped. So this generational decline, because the laboratory values are the averages of, I'll refer to it as subnormal testosterone levels from what you look at from a historical standpoint. And so they literally just dropped them in the last few months.
Interesting.
And so it's an interesting phenomenon. And there's I don't want to go off too far in this tangent, but there's also what's going on with sperm cells also is an issue.
Right.
Because
I have heard about that.
Sperm cell counts have dropped by 50% in the last 30 years. And there's a study out of Hebrew University. One of the named authors is also an epidemiologist from NYU. And others, and so they looked at a lot of studies. It took them almost forever to write this paper, but they said that the slope of that decline in sperm cells is such that by about 2050, most of the men in the world will not be able to conceive, will be infertile.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And they said like it just keep on drawing down, and it's a whole bunch of environmental and a lot of issues with endocrine disrupting compounds.
Yeah. Yeah, chronic environmental toxicity at a very low level. Yeah, it's kind of alarming. It's spoken about. My wife and I are using a fertility clinic. It's related to me having a vasectomy in 1990. Something I regret, by the way. That's something else if I were advising a young man today. There are alternatives, and many of us were stronger feminists in the 80s and the 70s and the 80s than we might be nowadays. Another topic. Anyway, so we're using a fertility clinic, and it's just phenomenal how many millennials are having difficulties conceiving. It's not an unusual thing at all. Yeah.
And it's interesting because in this book that Shauna Swan, she also writes about quality of eggs in women is decreasing, and also the quality. For men, it's not just the quality. It's not just the quantity of sperm, but it's also the quality is also
motility
decreasing. All of that is all decreasing. And I mean, it's crazy. It sounds. There's actually private equity groups creating sperm banks.
Wow. Yeah.
If there's the money, if there's private equity money going into it, there's somebody seeing a huge problem in the future.
Well, I would invest in fertility clinics. And what is Ovation Fertility is, I think, bought the one that, so they're now aggregating, and a lot of the small regional fertility clinics are being bought up by national groups. I think it's going to become definitely a growth industry.
So tell me a little bit about your your newest company is kwiKBio that you're working with.
Sure.
Tell me a little bit about what that's all about.
Well, kwiKBio intends to solve 10,000 human diseases faster by using citizen science and by empowering citizens. And we're talking 10 million, 50 million citizen scientists to move science forward as powerfully as they are doing in pharma. So what I'd like to tell people is that pharmaceutical science, government science, academia, biotech is slow science. It's slow because they're reproducing most of their experiments. They're overlapping 30% of all of their research focused on the three major disease areas: cancer, diabetes, chronic inflammation, some of the things we were talking about. Because these are the big money makers for pharma. If you can maintain a population in chronic illness with steady medication, you will make money for your drug. And they won't pursue research if their economic modelers haven't predicted that they can make back $2 billion in drug sales to get profit over the $1 billion it's going to cost them to get the drug through FDA. So it's incredibly expensive to build drugs. And pharma and biotech are not going to do the research to tell us that three cups of carrots and a little bit of turmeric and then a little bit of garlic in a certain mixture can do as well as one of their drugs. They won't tell us that. They're not induced to do the research that would find that out. So all of the potential health that lies ahead of us for citizen science is being ignored by government, academia, and the industry. And the reason for that is they have a monopoly on knowledge. It's a cabal. The government funds university research. You get a certification from the university that allows you, if you approved your publications through the journals, which are part of this monopoly, then you get a job with the pharmaceutical company and you get to get your drugs through the FDA, which is part of government. So the US NIH tells you that knowledge, that biomedical research knowledge is available to the public. It's not. It really is not. If you don't have an approved pathway through a university email, you don't even have access to most of their databases. And there's no open access, like say a Wikipedia or the online Merck manual through the government's provision of information. I hope it's getting better, but it's slow. So existing science is slow. And how do we speed it up? Well, we speed it up by creating what's now being called digital twin. So this is kind of the new parlance in the startup world for what we used to call dynamic computer modeling of a complex system. So a dynamic computer model, a mathematical model of a complex real world system is a simplification. It's a reduced form of what you understand the system to be and to work. Now we have 32 trillion cells in the human body. You obviously can't create a computer program that will tell you what every one of those cells are doing. So this is a process of reduced form modeling. It's something that I learned to do with global climate change, and we learned to do it in the Charles River watershed. There are a number of pharmaceutical companies that are doing modeling of disease. They have disease models, but these are very, very localized and they're not public. So I'm talking about giving citizen scientists a wonderful illustration would be, well, think about Google Earth for the human body. That's one way to think about it, to be able to zoom right into the body, down into the body, wherever you want to go, and zoom into a particular disease. Another wonderful illustration is this movie in the 1960s called, what was it called? The Fantastic Voyage or something like that, with Raquel Welch, and they shrunk a spaceship down and injected it in the body, and they went in and attacked a cancer tumor. So imagine that, those two things, or the magic school bus, which was used to teach kids in elementary school about shrinking their perspective down to the microscopic. So the idea is you give the capability to bring a citizen scientist right into the system at any level of resolution that you want, right down to the molecular level, or at the heart level, or at the full body level. And you give them a digital twin of a human, of a working human. And it could be themselves if they plug their 23andMe program in there and they put all their diet in there and they put their weight and they put their doctors, they put their electronic health record in there. Then you start to give them a model that's pretty close to themselves. Now, if you have a disease yourself, this is a great way for you really to learn about your disease and to interact with your doctor about your disease and about whatever therapy is being used to train you. But most importantly, to think right at the chemical molecular level about your diet and about your exercise and about maybe your chronic exposure to smoke or air. A bunch of ways of thinking much more directly about our own health, but most importantly, giving gifted kids at home who are being homeschooled a way to play doctor or medical researcher. Now we're starting in an area that I call upstream of phase 1 clinical. And the reason for that is I want to create this system in an e-learning space as a gateway for research in the medical space without engaging the regulatory structure of the FDA and the government, because they would be eager to shut me down, quite frankly. The US government, for instance, thinks that citizen scientists are a group of people that they will train to serve pharma, not citizens that are being given freedom to explore learning on their own. So it's a very different philosophical perspective. And so I'm being careful to stay out of the regulatory pathway, Fortunately, I am a lawyer, so I know the legal definition of practicing medicine. I'm allowed to use the word medical research. We can do research. The key is that the customers of kwiKBio won't be coming in telling me that they have a disease and me telling them I'm going to help solve it. When you come into kwiKBio, you'll sign a little thing that says, I'm healthy. And as long as I'm not thinking that you have any particular disease or that the group that you're collaborating with is telling you they're going to solve your disease, we don't tread on the toes of doctors or pharma or the FDA. But there's plenty of room in there for you to learn about your own body. We are still allowed to do autologous research, which means if I want to drink spring water one day and beer on the second day and wine on the third day and watch my blood change, I'm allowed to do that. In fact, we're allowing ourselves to ingest many other types of ingredients as well. And that's very, very, very useful if you want to do science on yourself. Mm-hmm. And then the other piece of this is not just to give you the capability to see the disease models and apply them to your own digital twin, but to collaborate with other citizen scientists in active teamwork. So you can imagine, well, here we are on Zoom. Right. Imagine you're on Zoom now with 10 other citizen scientists on your team, and you're kind of in your own little starship flying into the bloodstream, heading down to tackle pancreatic cancer. And you are all learning like crazy. And does it sound a little bit like bringing in polymath type attitude? It does a little bit, because sure. We're saying, yeah, you have the capability as a human to learn an entirely different direction than you ever thought you could. And I can give you enough information to bring you up to the level of a pharmaceutical researcher and above. Mm-hmm. And the other key thing is to allow you to run experiments to test hypotheses. And so there's a little bit of secret sauce in here, which is an invention that we patented. We have a US patent for something we call an automated system for researching systems. And this is a way of using artificial intelligence and machine learning and what's called the semantic web to use structured databases and an approach that uses reverse inferencing graphs to allow you to, I can generate hypotheses automatically for you. Oh. And this is really what a scientist does. So I allow you as a citizen to generate your own hypotheses, and then I give you a laboratory to test them.
Do you need accountability? Are you looking to change the course of your life but have failed to keep on track? Too often we take in information and fail to act. Do you need an accountability program to stay the course? Then go to www.thestandard.academy and find out about my accountability program that goes with my course that helps you find out what you want, why you want it, and how to get it. The accountability program keeps you on track to get results.
So Justin, you just used a bunch of words that you lost me completely.
This is what happens. You can see why it's hard to sell this startup to angel investors.
We have to rewind this thing because actually my oldest daughter is an engineer, and she does would you use? Would you say machine learning and
right? Well, so artificial intelligence and machine learning often are sort of thrown together.
Yeah. So what is machine learning, and what is everybody kind of has an idea of what? Well, I should say everyone. They've heard the word artificial intelligence, but they may not actually know what it means or what machine learning is.
Okay. All right. Well, let's see. It's the best way to simplify machine learning is imagine you want your computer to be able to take an image that you give it and tell you what animal it is or what person it is. And it's not a trivial thing to have the computer program recognize that the image is a cat. And so this is one of the kind of the classic examples. And quite simply, the way you do it is you train your program by giving it thousands of pictures, and you give it a way to summarize the shape and compare it to things that you tell it is a cat.
Mhm.
And then by trial and error, you have a way that the algorithm of your program is making a guess, and then you give it a reward score for whether the guess was correct or not. And by doing this with something that's called a neural net process, or it's a way that you run your guesses forward and backwards through many layers of categorization. So you allow the computer to say, okay, all my reasonably good guesses seem to be in this kind of category where there were all of these characteristics of that picture. And you allow the computer to actually figure out a whole bunch of parameters that it can ascribe to describe that picture. Maybe it decided that they were all slightly round, and maybe they were all slightly round and had two little triangles sticking up out of them. So you give them some geometric parameters.
Mhm.
Maybe there's some color parameters. None of them were pure purple. Most of them were slightly orange, or a lot of them were maybe slightly gray and white. So they're now, in the same way the human mind distinguishes that that's a picture of a cat, we're using thousands of little cues, testing it against our memory of images that we were told when we were kids, those are cats. And you can imagine sometimes we see little dogs that look like cats or look like rats, that you can actually create
Sure.
some animals that are hard to tell. But this is essentially what you're doing with machine learning, is you're using categories of test objects to train your machine to recognize an object
Okay.
that you give it in a certain category. Now you can extend that forward by making it more complex to think about different types of relationships than there's pictures of cats. Maybe you could train the machine to recognize tumors in a slice of liver.
Mhm.
So it turns out now that computers can do a better job than a human pathologist in recognizing tumors in tissue samples. So there are many instances where we can train the computer to teach us about things in the system that we can't see.
So their ability, the ability of the computer system to discern small differences is greater than our ability
Yes.
to
Yes.
discern what
And
those
most
are.
importantly, the ability of the computer system to take those little small differences and maybe find 1,000 of them and carefully put all of those differences into a bunch of conceptual categories that we can't quite do explicitly,
Mhm.
and to build rules out of those that allow it to make these types of decisions. But
Okay.
it's sort of, you teach the computer discernment.
Okay, discernment, and also and identify patterns and things like
Yes,
that.
yeah, pattern recognition. So it's
Yeah.
big, obviously, in self-driving cars. Elon Musk figuring out how to get its cars to drive down a street. That's a really challenging problem to have that
Mhm.
computer figure out what the human brain does. I mean, our brain is just fantastic in what we're able to accomplish. Being able to tell that that's a phone pole, not a person standing still next to the road.
Yeah. Well, sometimes people put that to the test when they're trying to multitask while they're driving too.
Yeah. Well, so in theory, the computer will do a better job because part of its brain won't be asleep the
Mhm.
way part of the human brain. This is a really fun game. Played this recently with my wife. You drive down the road and you say, okay, the next house we go by on the right, look at it for one chimpanzee, two chimpanzees, for 2 to 3 seconds as we zoom by the house. And then 3 seconds later, each of you says, what did you see? And what's fascinating is that we see completely different stuff.
Mhm.
So our own discernment as humans, and of course, we learn this in law school. That they'll give us in criminal law class, they'll do some dramatic thing in the law school class, and then the person goes out, and then we're all asked to describe what we see. And what you learn is that human witnesses to the exact same event see different things. They can see completely different events, even though there was only one event, but you had multiple witnesses. And so this is the kind of the flexibility, and this, in a way, it's the strength and the weakness of human perception. We don't all see everything in a particular scene.
So So Justin, let me ask you, what excites you about the future?
Oh, ah, well, so I'm very excited about the challenges that humans are embracing. I think you could argue it's never been an easy thing being a human. We've always had struggles between environmental challenges and our survival. We've had struggles between tribes of humans competing for resources or just competing for philosophy and dominance, this hierarchy thing. We're now living in an extremely fascinating period where most of the world is progressing forward in a social construct, a human society coupled to government and corporate existence. So human corporations, and we didn't talk about this. We probably don't have time to really get into it, but it turns out if you look at something called evolutionary thermodynamics, there's a whole branch of almost philosophy that will tell you that governments and corporations are essentially alive. They are as alive as you and me. And we, in our challenges with global warming and with war and with a whole bunch of other things that are just scary for a lot of our population, we are really up against that reality. We're up against this competition between corporations for their living process. And we are to them like our blood cells are when you run across the pucker brush to catch a rabbit for dinner and scratch your leg and your blood cells fall on the sand and die. You don't hear them screaming. You don't notice it. Your leg will scab over and you're going to enjoy that rabbit. Well, that's essentially what governments and corporations are doing as they grow. We are their components, and our quality of life does not matter to them. Mm-hmm. And we don't understand this as humans, and we're going to have to, because as the artificial intelligence reality descends around us, it will be held by government, it will be held by corporations. It's not going to be in your hands or my hands or even Elon Musk's hands. Artificial intelligence will form a marriage with the corporate life, government life, and of course the military and the energy industry are already part of that. Mm-hmm. So the future, what excites me about the future is humanity coming into that realization and figuring out how to manage it. Because many humans who do realize it will get into the driver's seat of those corporations and kind of drive the hell out of it. Mm-hmm. Musk may be doing a little bit of that, but he's got some conscience. He's worried about AI. We have to worry about AI. AI is incredibly exciting, but artificial intelligence, we are living in what we're calling the singularity. We are actually inside this progression of computers becoming, well, computers are already more intelligent than humans. Mm-hmm. AlphaGo Zero already beat the very best Korean Go player. We're not even close to them in chess anymore. And as they generalize their intelligence and increase their sensing of the environment, and we're giving them that with the Internet of Things, we come up to this reality where we are living with a much greater intelligence that is alive. It's actually alive. And so I don't know, what that's all going to look like, but it's terribly exciting, I think, because it's so, if you're interested in learning and you're curious, it's like, wow, that's going to be amazing.
It's exciting, and at the same time, it seems a little bit scary.
Yes, it's a little bit scary because we don't know about, but think about, even in the midst of this, the growth of corporations has been progressing for 500 years, and certainly avidly for 200 years. We've struggled with whatever traction we have in government to improve our quality of life where we can. Our water quality is better, our air quality is better. Maybe global warming will get a little bit ahead of us, but it's not going to kill us. It'll be expensive, but we we'll have to roll our cities back away from the coastlines. There are things like this. Other exciting things, I think that, this is an interesting one. I think extraterrestrials are on the planet. I think that our military has been observing them as much as these extraterrestrials have been observing us, perhaps for thousands of years. And they're living outside of our perception, probably for a reason. And it appears from the way they seem to be monitoring our nuclear capability that they are interested in us doing better for ourselves rather than worse. And so I'm very excited that within 20 to 30 years, we may get a little bit more, there may be what we would call an actual first contact, where it becomes much stronger evidence for this reality than we have thus far. I think a bunch of us who have paid attention to this research over the last 50 years have seen plenty of evidence that's extremely strong that this is the reality. But it's not something that can be proven because, well, there are two reasons. One, I think that the extraterrestrials are staying out of sight, and the government programs that know about them are super secret. So it's those two things together keep it out of our perception. But at a certain point, that may become something that's more public, and that's going to be really wild if we have an extraterrestrial intelligence telling us more about how the universe works and what's our role in it.
Okay.
That's exciting. And children and grandchildren, I'm in a men's group. I've been in there for 20 years, and those guys are so excited about their grandchildren. So I guess that's enough. Just children and grandchildren is enough to keep an optimism about the future.
Well, great. Well, Justin, I want to thank you. I want to thank you very much, and been certainly interesting.
It's been fun to meet you and to chat.
Yeah, we've gone places where we didn't think. We'll probably have to have you, but I got a couple of things we haven't covered. We can. It'll probably be interesting in terms of we can talk about next time. Maybe what is the challenge of being a man in the 21st century? Because I definitely have some. I have some opinion. I have some definite opinions on that.
The whole woke culture and Jordan Peterson, and we can rove. There's some room to rove around there.
Yeah. So, but I thank you, Justin. And for those of you, if you have not done it yet, go to the standard.academy/magazine and get my free digital magazine with articles and life hacks from experts on stuff that, well, you need to know, like one secret place to touch a woman and why men are peeing in their pants, among other articles. So in the meantime, I want you to do also several things. Subscribe, share, rate, and review. That's right. Subscribe, share, rate, and review. Until next time.
Thank you for joining Dr. Orist and his incredible guest. Like what you heard and learned? Then be sure to do 3 things. 1, subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. 2, share this with someone who may need to hear it. 3, leave a review and rate this podcast. Opt in at www.thestandard.academy/magazine and get our free digital magazine with savings, articles, and deeper dives into cool controversy. Be the guy who takes action. Without action, you're not going to get the results you want. Thank you again, and make it a great day.